Hey guys, tonight we are going to explore the quiet, everyday dangers of the Middle Ages. We're not talking about knights and battles. We're talking about the hidden perils lurking in the most mundane parts of life. The water you drink, the air you breathe, and most terrifyingly of all, the daily bread you eat. We're going to discover a world where your breakfast could literally make you dance until you dropped. With our modern reliance on things like food safety regulations and smoke detectors, most of us wouldn't last long enough to complain about the lack of Wi-Fi. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're tuning in from tonight and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see this community assembling from every corner of the globe. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken not to a sound, but to a feeling. It is the deep, damp cold of the hour just before dawn, a chill that has seeped through your thin wool blanket and settled deep into your bones. You lie on your pallet, a coarse sack stuffed with straw, and the first conscious thought that forms in your mind is a simple, urgent one. The fire is almost out. In your world, the hearth is the heart of life itself. It is your only source of warmth, your only means of cooking, and your only light in the crushing darkness of the night. But it is also your most intimate enemy. You get up, your bare feet meeting the cold, packed earth of the floor, and move to the center of your single-room hut. In a shallow, stone-lined pit, a handful of embers glow with a faint, pulsing orange light. You carefully blow on them, coaxing them back to life, and add a few precious dried sticks. A small flame flickers, and you feel a wave of relief. But as you watch the sparks dance upwards, you are keenly aware of the danger. You live inside a tinderbox. The walls of your home are a woven lattice of sticks and twigs, a technique called wattle, which has been smeared with a thick layer of daub, a mixture of clay, wet soil, and animal dung. Above you, the roof is a thick, dry layer of straw or reeds. This entire structure, your only shelter from the world, is breathtakingly flammable. A single errant spark, a moment of carelessness, could have the whole hut ablaze in minutes, a catastrophe from which there would be almost no escape. The fire that keeps you from freezing is in a constant, delicate negotiation with the home it could so easily consume. With the fire tended to, you turn your attention to your other sleeping companion, your bed. You give your heavy wool blanket a vigorous shake, a familiar morning ritual that does very little. Your straw-stuffed mattress is not just a place of rest. It is a thriving, self-contained ecosystem. It is the perfect home for a whole society of creatures who see you as their personal buffet. You are used to the constant, low-grade itch of the fleas and lice that live in the straw and in the seams of your clothes. But they are not your only bedfellows. Mice love to tunnel through the warm straw, and you occasionally hear their faint, scratching sounds in the night. On colder nights, it's not unheard of for a grass snake to seek the warmth of a sleeping human, a startling but mostly harmless discovery in the morning. Your bed is a gamble, a nightly wager on what tiny creatures you will be sharing your warmth with. You perform these small rituals, stoking the fire, shaking the blanket without conscious thought. They are as natural as breathing. Anthropologists debate the psychological impact of living with such constant, low-level threats. Did sleeping in a flammable hut filled with a menagerie of vermin create a state of perpetual, draining hypervigilance, a mind that could never truly rest? Or did it foster a kind of deep, resigned acceptance of dangers that were simply an unavoidable part of the fabric of life, as commonplace as the rising of the sun? The first pale, gray light of dawn begins to filter through the smoke hole in the roof and the small, unglazed openings in the walls. The light brings with it a sense of profound relief. You have survived the night. The darkness, with its unseen dangers and its deep, primal fears, is receding. The fire did not consume your home. The cold did not sicken you. Nothing slithered into your straw palate to bite you. You have been granted another day. For now, the dangers of your immediate environment are contained. The hut is still standing. You are still breathing. You have survived the simple, perilous act of waking up. Now, you must face the next challenge, the first task of the day, which comes with its own profound and hidden danger. You turn your attention to the small, coarse sack of dark rye flour in the corner of the room, and the heavy, flat stone you will use to mix your morning bread. You are hungry, but you are unaware that the greatest threat to your life today may not be the fire or the vermin, but a poison lurking silently within the grain itself. You take a wooden scoop and dip it into the coarse sack of dark rye flour that stands in the corner of your hut. You pour a mound of the grayish-brown flour onto a flat, smooth stone that serves as your kneading board. You add a trickle of water from a clay jug and a pinch of precious salt, mixing it all together with your hands until it forms a stiff, heavy dough. There is no yeast, no time for a slow rise. You shape the dough into a thick, round, flat cake and place it directly onto a hot stone at the edge of the hearth, letting the embers of the fire cook it through. The smell of baking bread, simple and wholesome, soon fills the smoky air. This is your daily bread. It is the very foundation of your existence, the fuel that will get you through a long day of hard labor. It is simple, it is reliable, and on some unfortunate years, it is a carrier of an invisible and terrifying poison. You are unaware, as you watch your bread bake, of the secret that the rye harvest can sometimes hold. In a year with a particularly damp, cool spring and a wet summer, a strange fungus can grow on the heads of the rye as it ripens in the field. It appears as a dark, purplish, horn-like growth, often larger than a healthy rye kernel itself. This is ergot. When the harvest comes, these hard, fungal bodies are gathered, right along with the good grain. They are so dense that they survive the threshing process, and when the grain is taken to the village mill, they are ground into the flour along with everything else. The poison is now hidden, an undetectable taint in the very sack of flour you use every morning. The bread is cooked. It is dark, almost black on the outside, dense and moist on the inside. You break off a piece and begin to eat. As you chew the coarse, slightly sour bread, you are blissfully ignorant that you might be participating in a deadly lottery. If this batch of flour is tainted, you may soon become acquainted with a sickness known by a holy and terrifying name, St. Anthony's fire. This is the disease of ergotism, and it comes in two horrific and distinct forms. The first is gangrenous. It would begin with an agonizing, searing pain in your hands and feet. The sensation, you would later learn, is caused by the poison in the bread severely constricting your blood vessels, cutting off circulation to your extremities. It would feel like your limbs are being consumed by an internal fire, a burning so intense that it is almost unimaginable. After a period of this torment, the burning would give way to a creeping numbness. Your fingers and toes, starved of blood, would begin to wither, turning black and dry and hard, like mummified twigs. And then, the final grotesque horror. Without any further pain, they would simply fall off. The second form of St. Anthony's fire is convulsive. This poison attacks your nervous system. It would begin with a tingling in your fingers, followed by painful muscle spasms that would twist your limbs into unnatural, claw-like positions. You would experience violent, writhing fits, your body contorting beyond your control. But the worst part would be the hallucinations. You would see terrifying visions, hear demonic voices, feel things crawling on your skin. Your mind would be plunged into a waking nightmare from which there is no escape. The symptoms of convulsive ergotism, the jerking, the visions, the manic energy are so bizarre that some historians have controversially proposed this fungus as a biological explanation for historical events, often blamed on demonic possession or mass hysteria. The famous dancing plagues of the late Middle Ages where entire villages would seemingly take to the streets, dancing manically and uncontrollably for days, on end until they collapsed from exhaustion or injury, might not have been a spiritual mania at all. It may have been a mass poisoning, an entire community writhing in the hallucinatory grip of the same tainted harvest. But you in your hut know nothing of this. You only know the taste of your bread. It might taste a little more bitter than usual, but you dismiss it. The quality of the flour is never consistent. You finish your simple meal, your stomach full, ready to start the day. For now, you feel fine. The poison, if it is there, is a slow-acting one, its effects taking days or even weeks to manifest. You have eaten the meal that sustains you, never suspecting that it could be the very thing that will bring about your most agonizing end. Your breakfast is finished. The dry bread has left you thirsty. You need a drink to wash it down before you head out to the fields. And this simple, natural desire presents you with the next of the day's hidden dangers. The dense, dry rye bread you ate for breakfast has done its job of filling your stomach, but it has left your mouth and throat feeling as parched as a dusty road in summer. A powerful, primal thirst builds within you. You need a drink of cool, clean water to wash away the gritty remnants of your meal and prepare for the day's work. This simple, natural desire, however, presents you with your first conscious dilemma of the day, a choice between two equally perilous options. You pick up a worn wooden bucket and step outside your hut. Your first instinct is to head to the stream that runs just beyond the village. It is the most plentiful and convenient source of water. From a distance, it looks beautiful, the morning sun sparkling on its rippling surface as it gurgles merrily over smooth stones. It seems to be the very picture of life-giving purity. But you know better. You know that the stream is the village's artery, but it is also its sewer. You have seen with your own eyes what goes into this water. Just upstream, the runoff from the communal midden heap, with all its rotting refuse, seeps into the soil and trickles into the current. The local butcher, after slaughtering an animal, will often swill the blood and offal from his work area directly into the river. If your village is large enough to have a tanner, his workshop is deliberately placed on the riverbank, so he can easily dispose of the foul chemical and organic waste from his vats. And every single day, from every hut in the village, the contents of chamber pots are unceremoniously dumped into the same flowing water. The stream is a convenient moving drain that carries everyone's problems away. You don't know about bacteria, about E. coli or cholera, but you know about the bloody flux. You have seen what happens to people who drink too freely from the river. You have seen strong men laid low with crippling stomach cramps, a raging fever, and a debilitating dysentery that drains the very life and fluid from their bodies. In a world without modern medicine, without intravenous drips to rehydrate a ravaged system, this common sickness is a frequent killer, especially of the very old and the very young. That sparkling, inviting water is a game of chance you are not willing to play this morning. Perhaps the well, then. In the center of the village green, there is a stone-lined well, dug deep into the earth. The water from the well is always cooler and clearer than the river water. It seems safer, filtered by the earth itself. But the well carries its own secret dangers. It is just a deep hole in the ground, and the water table it draws from is the same one that filters the runoff from the entire village. It is located not 50 paces from the graveyard, and perhaps even closer to a hidden, leaking cesspit you try not to think about. A few years ago, half the village was struck down with a mysterious intestinal ailment, and the elders eventually decided the well had been cursed by an evil spirit. They had the priest bless it, but you know that the well's purity is never guaranteed. Faced with the choice between a definite poison and a potential one, you turn your back on both. You return to the smoky darkness of your own hut. The safest drink available to you in this entire perilous world is the one sitting in the large wooden barrel in the corner. You ladle out a cup of your family's small beer. You choose the ale not because you have any knowledge of microbiology or the purifying effects of boiling. You have no concept of germs. Historians of public health often point out that this widespread preference for brewed beverages was based on simple, powerful empirical evidence. It was the result of a lifetime of observation. You know that your neighbors who are careless and drink from the river are often sick. You know that your own family, who drink almost nothing but this weak ale, rarely suffer from the bloody flux. Your reasoning is simple. The water is angry or cursed. The ale is safe. It was a perfect public health solution arrived at for entirely the wrong reasons. You take a long drink. The ale is lukewarm, with a thin texture and a distinctly sour cidery taste. It is nothing like the strong, rich ale you might be treated to at a festival, but it is wet, and it quenches your thirst. And most importantly, you know it will not turn on you. The process of brewing, of boiling the water with the grains, has inadvertently sterilized it, killing the invisible demons of sickness that thrive in the river. You drain the cup, feeling the simple relief of a thirst now slaked. You reflect for a moment on the grim reality of your morning. You have survived the potential dangers of fire and vermin in your own bed. You have eaten a breakfast that carries a hidden risk of madness and decay, and you have quenched your thirst by choosing the only beverage that is not actively trying to kill you. The day has barely begun, and already you have successfully navigated a minefield of mundane dangers. Now, with your stomach full and your thirst satisfied, you must turn your attention to your labor. You pick up your hoe, its handle worn smooth by your own hands, and head out towards the open fields, ready to face the next set of perils that the world has in store. You arrive at your narrow strip of land in the great open field. The sun is beginning to climb, and its warmth on your back is a pleasant sensation. For the next several hours, your world will be reduced to this small patch of earth. Your task today is to cut the long grass for hay, a job that requires a simple tool and a great deal of repetitive, back-breaking labor. You take up your sickle, its iron blade sharpened against a stone last night, its wooden handle worn smooth and dark from years of your own sweat and grit. You bend at the waist and begin to work, the rhythm of it as familiar as your own heartbeat. Swing, grasp, slice. Swing, grasp, slice. You gather a handful of long grass, pull it taut, and draw the curved blade of the sickle through the stalks. It's a movement you have performed thousands, perhaps millions of times. Your mind goes blessedly blank, focused only on the task, the feel of the grass, the rhythmic ache building in your lower back. It happens, as accidents always do, in a moment of inattention. Perhaps you're distracted by the drone of a bee, or your foot slips on a patch of damp earth. Your swing is slightly off. Your grip on the handful of grass falters, and the sharp inner curve of the sickle blade slices across the back of your other hand. The pain is sharp and immediate, a hot sting that makes you cry out. You drop the sickle and stare at your hand. It is not a deep or serious wound, not a gash that will require the barber surgeon. It is a simple, shallow cut, perhaps an inch long, welling up with dark, rich blood. Your first reaction is not fear, but a surge of annoyance at your own carelessness. You tear a strip of linen from the hem of your already ragged tunic, wrap it tightly around the cut to staunch the bleeding, and after a few moments of cursing your clumsiness, you pick up your sickle and get back to work. But as you continue your labor, a new, cold seed of worry begins to sprout in your mind. The danger is not the cut itself. The danger is what comes after. In your world, there is no difference between a small wound and a mortal one. Any break in the skin is an open door, an invitation for a world of unseen evils to enter your body. The iron of your sickle is coated in a fine layer of rust, and the soil it cuts through. Your own hands are caked in the same dirt. You have just introduced that filth directly into your own blood. You know it can happen. You've seen it. A wound that begins to fester. You've seen the red streaks that can travel up a person's arm from a simple splinter, a sign that the poison is spreading. You've seen the high fevers, the swelling, the foul-smelling pus. And you have heard the terrifying tales of lockjaw, the horrifying affliction that can start from a puncture wound from a dirty nail, where a man's own jaw muscles clamp shut with such force that he starves to death, unable to open his mouth. This small, insignificant cut on your hand is now a ticking clock, a race between your body's own healing power and the potential for a swift and agonizing death. That evening, back in the hut, your hand is throbbing with a dull, insistent pain. The cut needs to be treated. Your spouse, your family's designated healer for such small matters, prepares a poultice. This is the folk medicine you trust, a wisdom passed down through generations. She might chew a wad of yarrow leaves, a plant known for its ability to stop bleeding, and apply the green mashed paste directly to your wound. Or perhaps she will use a more common dressing, a thick layer of fresh, sticky cobwebs, which you believe have a magical ability to knit the flesh back together. Tonight, she chooses the most trusted remedy for a wound that might go bad. She takes a piece of leftover bread, chews it until it is a soft, gummy paste, and then presses it firmly into the cut, binding it with a fresh strip of linen. You trust this remedy, this simple magic of the household. Medical historians debate the efficacy of these treatments. Were most of them, like the application of animal dung, a surefire way to introduce even more dangerous bacteria into a wound? Or did some of them, by sheer dumb luck, actually work? The sticky cobwebs, for example, do have some natural antiseptic and antifungal properties. And the poultice of chewed bread? If that bread happened to be growing the right kind of mold, a strain of penicillium, you might have just unwittingly applied a crude, low dose of a powerful antibiotic directly to your cut. Was it a miracle of folk wisdom, or a 1-in-a-million biological chance? For the next few days, you live in a state of quiet, watchful anxiety. Every throb from your hand sends a jolt of fear through you. You check your arm constantly for the dreaded red streaks. You open and close your jaw, testing it, praying you don't feel the first hint of stiffness. It is a waiting game against an invisible enemy. But you are lucky. After 3 days, you unwrap the bandage. The wound has not festered. It has scabbed over cleanly, the skin around it a healthy color. It itches, a sure sign of healing. You have won this small, terrifying lottery. The danger is past. The immense feeling of relief is quickly followed by a new awareness, a fresh understanding of your own fragility. You survived the cut. But as you look out from your hut towards the dark, dense woods that border the fields, the woods belonging to the lord of the manor, you are reminded that there are other dangers. Dangers that have nothing to do with accident or infection, but with the harsh, unyielding laws of men. The cut on your hand is now a tight, itching scab, a small personal victory against the invisible world of infection. The relief is so profound it makes you feel reckless, lucky. You are working at the far edge of the great field today, your strip of land bordering the dark, dense woods that stretch for miles to the north. This is the Lord's forest, and you normally keep your distance. As you stop to wipe the sweat from your brow, a movement at the edge of the trees catches your eye. A magnificent stag steps silently into the clearing. It is a creature of impossible grace and beauty, its antlers a crown of polished wood, its coat a rich, warm brown. It is larger than any animal you have ever seen up close. But your first thought is not of its beauty. Your first thought is of meat. Your stomach gives a low, hungry rumble. You see not a living creature, but a feast. You imagine a haunch of venison roasting over your fire, the fat dripping and sizzling, the rich, gamey scent filling your small hut. You imagine your family, their faces glowing in the firelight, eating their fill of real meat, a luxury you might taste only once or twice a year at a great festival. The stag represents more food than you might see in 6 months, a wealth of sustenance that makes your head spin. The temptation is a physical, visceral thing. It is a hunger so deep, it feels like a kind of madness. And then, just as quickly, a wave of cold, absolute fear crashes over you, extinguishing the fantasy. This is not just a forest. It is a preserve. And that magnificent animal is not a wild creature belonging to God and the earth. It is the personal property of the lord of the manor, as much his as the castle he lives in, or the horse he rides. You live under two sets of laws. In the village and the fields, there is the common law, with its fines and public shaming. But here, at the edge of these woods, a different and far more brutal set of rules applies. This is the realm of the forest law, a legal code designed for one purpose: to protect the lord's hunting pleasure. Under this law, the animals of the forest, the deer, the boar, the rabbits, are more valuable than you are. The crime of poaching is the most serious offense a man like you can commit. And it is not just the act of killing a deer that is forbidden. To be caught within the forest boundary, carrying a bow, would be a crime. To set a snare for a rabbit would be a crime. To gather firewood for your hearth, or even to allow your pig to forage for acorns within the woods, could be seen as an offense against the Lord's domain. The forest is a forbidden kingdom, and you are not welcome. You know the punishments. They are stories told in hushed, fearful tones in the alehouse. A man caught snaring a rabbit might be tied to a post in the village square, and flogged until his back is a bloody ruin, or fined a sum of silver so vast his family would be in debt for generations. But for a deer, for the noble heart, the penalties are a kind of living death, often designed with a terrifying, literal justice. A man caught with a bow might have the first 2 fingers of his right hand struck off with a chisel, so he could never draw a string again. A man whose dog was caught chasing a deer would have the dog's foreclaws removed by a red-hot iron, crippling the animal. And a man caught in the act of killing a stag, like the one before you, he could be blinded, castrated, or simply hanged from the nearest oak tree as a warning to others. You understand this law as a simple fact of life. The deer belongs to the Lord. But legal historians debate the primary purpose of these brutal forest laws. Were they genuinely about conserving the animals for the aristocratic hunt, ensuring there was always plentiful game for the Lord's table and his sport? Or were they more fundamentally a powerful and terrifying tool of social control, a way to keep the peasantry dependent? To demonstrate the Lord's absolute and violent authority over the land and everything on it, and to reserve the protein-rich resource of meat for the ruling class? The stag is still there, calmly tearing at a patch of clover, oblivious to the life and death struggle happening in your mind. The hunger in your belly wars with the terror in your heart. The feast versus the flogging post. Your family's well-being versus your own. It is the most profound temptation you have ever felt, a direct invitation to risk everything for a moment of abundance. For a long, silent moment, you are frozen, your hand gripping the handle of your hoe. Then the stag lifts its great head. Its dark, liquid eyes seem to look directly at you. There is a flicker of understanding, or perhaps just animal caution. With a flick of its tail, it turns and bounds silently back into the deep shadows of the forest, vanishing as if it were never there at all. The choice has been made for you. You are left with a pounding heart and the ghost of a feast on your tongue. The relief is so intense it makes your knees feel weak, but it is mingled with a sharp, bitter tang of disappointment. You have just survived another of the day's hidden dangers, one that came not from a fungus or a rusty blade, but from the simple, unyielding fact of your own powerlessness. The world suddenly feels very small, a prison of open fields bordered by a forbidden forest. The desire to escape, to go somewhere else, if only for a day, is overwhelming. You will finish your work, but your mind is made up. Tomorrow, you will walk to town. The memory of the stag and the profound, terrifying choice it represented has left you feeling restless, confined by the familiar landscape of your village. The next morning, you decide to escape. You set out on a long walk to the nearest walled town, seeking the noise. The crowds, the sheer distraction of a different world, a place where the dangers are at least different from the ones you know so well. After a few hours, you approach the town's formidable gatehouse. You pass through the dark, echoing archway and step into the town proper. The change is instantaneous and absolute. The open air and relative quiet of the countryside are replaced by a dense, chaotic, and hazardous environment. A walk through a medieval town is not a leisurely stroll. It is an exercise in constant, draining vigilance. The first danger is the street itself. It is not a street in the modern sense, but a narrow, winding, unpaved lane, its surface a treacherous concoction of mud, packed earth, and filth. A central gutter, or kennel, runs down the middle, thick with a dark, stagnant slurry of human and animal waste. You must watch every step to keep from turning an ankle in a deep, muddy pothole or slipping on a discarded vegetable peel. The air is filled with the rumble of iron-rimmed cartwheels and the clatter of hooves, and you have to press yourself against a wall as a merchant's cart, pulled by a massive, straining horse, thunders past, splashing a wave of foul-smelling mud onto your leggings. The second danger comes from above. The upper stories of the tall, timber-framed houses lean out over the street, creating a permanent twilight below. As you navigate a particularly narrow alley, you hear a sudden, sharp cry from a window above. Gardy-loo. You react without thinking, leaping back into a doorway, just as a bucketful of slop-dirty water, vegetable peelings, and the contents of a chamber pot rains down onto the spot where you were just standing. The warning shout is the only courtesy you can expect. The third danger is the crowd itself. The narrow streets are packed with people, a constant river of humanity. You are pushed and jostled, your shoulder brushing against a wealthy merchant in a fine woolen cloak, your arm bumping against a beggar in filthy rags. This close, unavoidable contact is a perfect medium for the transmission of disease. You squeeze past a man whose face is covered in weeping sores, and you instinctively turn your head away, holding your breath, a small, futile gesture against an invisible threat you don't understand but rightly fear. You move through this crush of bodies, a sea of unfamiliar faces and smells. Urban planners and historians discuss the very concept of personal space in a medieval town. With streets this narrow and houses this crowded, did the modern idea of a personal bubble simply not exist? Or were there complex, unspoken social rules about gaze, touch, and right-of-way that governed how this dense mass of humanity was able to function without constant, violent conflict? But conflict is never far away. As you pass a crowded tavern, you see a perfect example of the fourth great danger of the streets: sudden violence. An argument has broken out between two men, a burly butcher's apprentice and a wiry-looking weaver. Their voices are raised in anger over a gambling debt or a perceived insult. A small crowd gathers to watch the spectacle. The argument escalates from shouts to shoves. And then, in a flash, the weaver, feeling he is losing the physical confrontation, draws the long, sharp dagger that hangs at his belt. It is a tool he uses every day to cut thread, but it is also a deadly weapon. The butcher's apprentice, seeing the glint of steel, draws his own heavy knife. The crowd that had been enjoying the show melts away in an instant, pressing back to avoid getting caught in the affray. A simple disagreement over a few coins has, in the space of a few heartbeats, turned into a life or death struggle. You hurry past, not wanting to be a witness or, worse, a victim. The town guard will likely arrive to break it up, but the incident is a stark reminder that in a world where almost every man is armed with at least a knife, violence can erupt with terrifying speed and finality. The walk through town is an exhausting gauntlet. You must look down to avoid the filth, look up to avoid the falling waste, and look around to avoid the press of the crowd and the sudden flash of a blade. The constant noise, the overwhelming smells, the sheer sensory overload, it all leaves you feeling drained and on edge. You came here seeking distraction, and you have certainly found it. But it is not the pleasant escape you had hoped for. It is just a different, more concentrated, and more chaotic set of dangers. You find yourself scanning the street ahead, looking for a place that promises a different kind of experience, a place of strange cures and mysterious potions. You see the colorful, painted sign of an apothecary and decide to investigate. The chaos of the town street has left you feeling frayed and vulnerable, acutely aware of the 100 small ways your body could be broken or sickened. You push your way through the throng into the main market square, and your attention is immediately captured by a large, noisy crowd gathered around a small, raised wooden stage. A man with a lute is playing a jaunty, repetitive tune, and another man, dressed in a ridiculously colorful doublet of red and yellow, is addressing the crowd with a booming, confident voice. This is a mountebank, a traveling quack doctor. He is part performer, part salesman, and he is selling the most precious commodity in this dangerous world, hope. Are you troubled by a lingering cough? He bellows, his voice echoing across the square. Do your joints ache with the damp of winter? Does the melancholy humor weigh down your spirit? He pauses, making eye contact with people in the crowd. Forget the learned physicians with their expensive fees and their nonsensical star charts. They will bleed your purse dry and leave you sicker than when you started. But I have the secret. With a theatrical flourish, he holds up a small dark glass bottle filled with a thick, oily liquid. Here it is, the cordial of Hermes Trismegistus, a single elixir, a true panacea, passed down to me from a wise hermit who discovered it in a forgotten tomb of the great pharaohs. It will purge your body of all ill humors, restore your natural vigor, and make you feel young again. His performance is masterful. He moves about the stage with an actor's energy, his promises growing more extravagant with each sentence. He calls up his assistant, the lute player, who feigns a terrible hacking cough. The mountebank gives him a small spoonful of the dark liquid. The assistant swallows it, grimaces, and then, miraculously, straightens his back, takes a deep, clear breath, and sings a beautiful, soaring note. The crowd applauds, a ripple of awe and excitement passing through them. You watch, intrigued despite your better judgment. The quack doctor explains how his miracle cure works. It is not a gentle medicine, he warns. It is powerful. It works by seeking out the poisons and corruptions within your body and violently expelling them. When you take my cordial, he proclaims, you will feel its power. It will cleanse you from within. A great purging is the sign that the sickness is leaving your body. What you do and know is that this great purging is the effect of the cordial's main ingredients. To create such a dramatic physical reaction, these potions were often laced with powerful and toxic substances. The violent vomiting and diarrhea the patients experienced were caused by ingredients like antimony, lead, or even mercury. The patient, feeling their body being evacuated so forcefully, would naturally assume it was the disease being driven out. They felt the medicine was working precisely because it was making them so violently ill. The cure was, in fact, the poison. You look at the quack on his stage, his eyes shining with conviction, as he tells another story of a miraculous cure. Historians of medicine and folklore debate the true nature of these figures. Was this man a cynical charlatan, a con artist who knew he was selling a dangerous poison for profit to desperate people? Or did he, in his own misguided way, genuinely believe in the efficacy of his remedy? Did he, like the patients themselves, interpret the violent sickness his potion caused not as a harmful side effect, but as the main effect and necessary and powerful expulsion of the body's corrupt humors, the only true path to health? His sincerity, whether real or feigned, is incredibly convincing. You see people in the crowd pushing forward, their faces full of hope. A woman with a large goiter on her neck, a man leaning heavily on a crutch, a young couple with a pale, sickly-looking child. They eagerly hold up their coins, trading their hard-earned money for a small bottle of the dark, promising liquid. They are buying a miracle. You feel a twinge in your own back, a memory of the ache from the fields. You think of the ever-present risk of sickness, of the cut on your hand that could have turned deadly. For a moment, the temptation is strong. The promise of a single cure for all of life's potential ailments is a powerful siren song. But you clutch the few coins in your pouch, the coins you earned from your own honest labor, and a healthy, peasant skepticism wins out. It seems too easy, too theatrical. You are not yet desperate enough to place your faith and your coin in the hands of this shouting man on his stage. You turn away from the performance, leaving the charlatan to his booming promises and his hopeful, gullible audience. The experience has made you wary of easy answers and dramatic cures. But it has also sharpened your curiosity. If this is the false medicine of the marketplace, what does the real medicine look like? You decide to seek out a proper apothecary, a man not of spectacle and noise, but of quiet shelves, dusty books, and mysterious labeled jars. You want to see what dangers and what hopes lie within a real house of healing. You leave the quack stage and the disappointed murmur of the crowd behind you. Pushing your way down a quieter side street, you have seen the medicine of spectacle and false promises. Now you seek its opposite. You are looking for a place of quiet knowledge, of genuine, if perhaps misguided, learning. You soon find it, a small, respectable shop with a neatly painted wooden sign hanging above the door, depicting a mortar and pestle, the universal symbol of the apothecary's trade. You step inside, and the sensory world shifts dramatically once again. The chaotic noise of the market is replaced by a deep scholarly quiet. The shop is cool and dark, a welcome relief from the sun and the crowds. And the smell is overwhelmingly complex. It is not one single odor, but 100, all layered on top of one another. It is the dry, dusty, and fragrant scent of 1,000 dried herbs, the sharp tang of minerals and chemicals, the sweet perfume of exotic spices, and the faint, papery smell of old books. The walls are lined from floor to ceiling with dark wooden shelves, and on those shelves sit a seemingly infinite collection of earthenware jars, glass bottles, and small wooden drawers, each marked with a neat scribbled label you cannot read. Bunches of dried herbs, chamomile, yarrow, St. John's wort, hang from the rafters like strange desiccated chandeliers. It is a library of cures, a silent, mysterious arsenal in the war against sickness. Behind a long wooden counter stands the apothecary himself. He is the polar opposite of the flamboyant mountebank. He is a quiet, serious-looking man with ink stains on his fingers and a pair of spectacles perched on his nose, a sign of both learning and wealth. He wears a simple, clean apron and regards you with a calm, appraising gaze. This is not a performer. This is a man of a respected guild, a keeper of secrets. Not having a specific ailment to be cured, you approach him with a general question. You tell him you often feel weary from your labor and ask what sort of tonic a man might take to strengthen his constitution and keep his humors in good balance. The apothecary nods slowly, pleased to demonstrate his knowledge. He begins to show you his materia medica, the vast array of substances from which he compounds his remedies. He shows you familiar things first. A jar of willow bark, which he explains is good for aches and fevers. A box of dried ginger root, a heating spice, good for a cold stomach. But then he moves to the more potent and exotic ingredients. He points to a glass jar filled with what looks like shriveled purple flowers. Foxglove, he says. A powerful medicine for a weak or fluttering heart, but it must be used with extreme care. A dose the size of a bean can heal. A dose the size of 2 beans can kill. The danger is presented as a simple matter of fact. Next, he pulls down a heavy stone jar and carefully scoops out a small amount of a dark, crumbly, and slightly sticky powder. It has a strange, resinous, ancient smell. "This is our finest mumia," he says with a hint of pride, "brought all the way from the tombs of Egypt." It is, you realize with a jolt, powdered mummy. He explains that the bitumen, spices, and magical resins used by the ancients to preserve their dead for all eternity contain a powerful virtue, which can be transferred to the living to fight decay and disease. You gaze at the jar of mummy dust, a substance that feels more like a magical relic than a medicine. Pharmacological historians debate the true thinking behind these exotic cures. Was the inclusion of powdered mummy a form of sympathetic magic, the belief that the preservative powers of the ancients could be symbolically transferred to your own body? Or was there a sincere, albeit flawed, proto-scientific theory that the physical bitumen and spices used in mummification held tangible properties that could fight infection? The line between medicine and magic in this quiet, scholarly shop is almost impossible to find. The apothecary goes on, pointing out other treasures. A smooth, stone-like object on a velvet cloth is a bezoar, a growth taken from the stomach of a Persian goat, which he claims is a universal antidote to any poison. He shows you a jar of live woodlice, which he says are sovereign for an afflicted liver, and a bottle of oil in which scorpions have been steeped, a potent salve for painful joints. You are impressed by his vast knowledge and the sheer strangeness of his inventory, but you are also deeply unsettled. The quack doctor in the square was selling an obvious theatrical poison. The apothecary, in his quiet, learned way, seems to be doing the same, but with more complex and far more expensive ingredients. The danger here is more subtle, wrapped in the comforting authority of tradition and scholarship. The cures seem just as frightening as the diseases they are meant to treat. You decide you are not feeling quite so weary after all. You politely decline to buy a tonic, thank the apothecary for his time, and back out of the shop into the familiar, if still dangerous, world of the street. Your head is swimming with the names of bizarre remedies and the images of toxic plants and powdered ancient bodies. The visit has not reassured you about the safety of your world. It has only shown you that even in the hands of a learned expert, medicine is a dangerous and mysterious art, and it makes you wonder about the next step in the medical hierarchy, the man who doesn't just mix potions, but who physically cuts into the body itself. You step back into the street, your head swimming with the apothecary's strange and unsettling pharmacopoeia. The world of medicine seems to be a choice between the loud, theatrical poison of the mountebank and the quiet, scholarly poison of the apothecary. As you continue your walk through the town, you are drawn to another small crowd gathered outside a shop. This one is marked not by a painted sign, but by a simple wooden pole painted with a twisting spiral of red and white. It is the unmistakable sign of the barber surgeon. Unlike the apothecary's shop, which was a quiet place of mystery and study, this establishment is open and raw. You can see directly inside. It is a room of practical, messy work. On one side, there is a simple chair with scissors and razors laid out for shaving and hair cutting. On the other side of the room, however, is a second sturdier chair, and next to it, a table laid out with a far more intimidating set of tools: sharp blades, metal hooks, saws, and a collection of brass bowls. This is the place you come when your problem cannot be solved with a potion or a prayer, but requires the direct intervention of a blade. The small crowd is gathered to watch a procedure. A young man, a stonemason's apprentice by the look of his dusty clothes, sits in the sturdier chair, his face pale with sweat and his jaw swollen to twice its normal size. You know the agony he is in without having to ask. It is a rotten tooth, an abscess, a small pocket of excruciating pain that has made his life a misery. The quack's cordial cannot touch this. The apothecary's powdered mummy is useless. This is a physical problem that requires a physical and brutal solution. The barber surgeon, a burly man with powerful forearms and a blood-stained leather apron, approaches his patient. There is no gentle bedside manner, no pretense of comfort. He offers the young man a long swig of strong ale from a leather flask, the only anesthetic available. Then he turns to his tray of tools. He does not select a simple pair of pliers. He picks up a fearsome-looking instrument made of black iron. It is a dental pelican, a tool named for its curved beak-like claw. It is designed not to pull the tooth upwards, but to hook underneath the crown and use leverage to brutally wrench it sideways from its socket. It is a tool of pure, efficient force. The patient, his eyes wide with terror, grips the arms of the chair until his knuckles are white. The barber surgeon, with a practiced and unsympathetic motion, forces the man's mouth open and maneuvers the cold iron claw into place. He positions the fulcrum on the outer gum and takes a firm grip on the handle. There is a moment of terrible silence as he finds his purchase. Then he heaves. A strangled scream escapes the patient's throat. The sound is not just of pain, but of a deep structural violence. You hear a wet, cracking sound as the root of the tooth splinters under the immense pressure. The barber surgeon gives another powerful twist, and the tooth, or at least a large, bloody piece of it, comes free. The surgeon holds it up for a moment, a triumphant, gory trophy, before tossing it into a bucket. The patient spits a stream of blood onto the floor, his body trembling with shock and relief. The immediate, piercing agony of the abscess is gone. But as you stand there, watching the man stumble out of the shop with a wad of linen pressed to his bleeding mouth, you notice things that the patient, in his pain, did not. The iron pelican was simply wiped on the surgeon's apron before being used. It was not washed. The surgeon's hands, though strong and steady, were grimy with the dirt of his last customer. The wad of linen he gave the patient was pulled from a pile of other rags that did not look particularly clean. Medical historians who study patient outcomes suggest that the greatest danger in a scene like this was not the agony of the procedure, or even the risk of a shattered jaw from the crude instrument. The most likely killer was the near certainty of post-operative infection, a phenomenon known as iatrogenesis, a sickness caused by the healer himself. In a world with no concept of sterilization, the barber surgeon has just introduced a universe of new bacteria and filth directly into the man's raw, open wound. The patient has been saved from the pain of the tooth, but he may well die in a week from the fever caused by its cure. You watch the young man go, and you feel a new and more profound kind of dread. You have now seen the full spectrum of medieval healing. The quack sells you false hope in a bottle. The apothecary sells you learned and expensive poisons. And the barber surgeon, the most practical and effective of them all, solves your immediate problem at the likely cost of creating a new, more deadly one later on. There appears to be no safe harbor, no path to healing that is not fraught with its own unique and terrible danger. Disillusioned with the world of medicine, you turn away from the bloody spectacle. You have your coins. The day is growing late. You feel a deep need for the simple, predictable comfort of human company, for a moment of thoughtless recreation. You decide to seek solace not from a healer, but from a brewer. You head towards the familiar, noisy, and much more honest danger of the local alehouse. Disillusioned by the grim and dangerous theater of medieval medicine, you seek refuge in the one place that offers a reliable, if temporary, cure for the soul, the alehouse. You push through the door into the familiar fog of warm bodies, wood smoke, and spilled ale, the loud roar of conversation a welcome blanket against the anxieties of the town. You purchase a cup of strong, sour ale with one of your hard-earned coins, and find a small, dark corner where you can sit and simply observe, letting the noise wash over you. For a while, it works. The warmth of the fire and the stronger warmth of the ale begin to soothe your frayed nerves. The sounds are a comforting drone. A boastful story here, a burst of laughter there, a dispute over a game of dice at a nearby table. It is the sound of humanity at rest, its guard momentarily down. But as you sip your ale, your attention is drawn to a quiet but intense conversation happening at a table near yours. There are 3 men, their heads close together, their voices low and earnest. You recognize one as a weaver, another works as a clerk for a wealthy merchant. They are not drunk and boisterous like the other patrons. They are sober and serious. And you begin to overhear their words. The conversation starts as a common complaint, the sort of grumbling you hear all the time. They are talking about the wealth of the local priory, about the fat, well-fed monks who own half the land in the shire while common folk struggle. This is safe, familiar territory. But then the conversation takes a turn. It shifts from a critique of men to a questioning of the very foundations of your world. One of the men, the one who looks like he has traveled, leans in and speaks in a near whisper. "But why," he asks, "must we confess our sins to a priest at all? Is God not able to hear a man's prayer directly?" The other men glance around nervously. Another adds, "And the Mass?" The priest speaks the Latin, but what do the words mean? "We are like cattle in a field, listening to sounds we cannot comprehend." The third man nods, emboldened. He holds up the bread and says it is the body of Christ. "But my eyes see only bread. My tongue tastes only bread. How can it be both?" A cold dread begins to creep up your spine, a fear far sharper and deeper than anything you felt watching the barber surgeon. The ale in your stomach feels like a cold stone. This is not simple grumbling. This is not a complaint about a greedy priest. This is heresy. This is a danger that transcends the physical world. A cut from a rusty sickle can kill your body, but a single misspoken word like this can damn your immortal soul and see your body burned to ash by the authorities of the church. The loud, cheerful alehouse has suddenly become the most dangerous place you have been all day. The first man whispers again, this time about a radical preacher he once heard speak, a man from Oxford named Wycliffe. He says this preacher taught that the Bible, the very word of God, should be translated into the common tongue so that anyone, even a humble craftsman like you, could read it for himself. He argued that if ordinary people could read the scriptures, they would find no mention of the Pope's vast power, of pardons sold for coin, or of the need for priests to act as intermediaries between man and God. This idea is so profoundly dangerous, so subversive to the order of the world, that even whispering it here feels like a capital crime. It is the central belief of the heretics they call the Lollards, the mumblers, and the church hunts them with a tireless fury. You shrink further into your dark corner, trying to make yourself invisible, terrified that someone will notice you are listening. You look around the room at the other drinkers, laughing and shouting, oblivious to the quiet, soul-destroying treason being spoken just a few feet away. You wonder how many of them harbor similar secret doubts. Historians of popular religion debate how widespread these heretical ideas truly were among the common laity. Were they confined to a few educated dissenters who had the ability to read and think critically about doctrine? Or were these fundamental questions about the church's immense wealth and temporal power a common, if very carefully hidden, feature of everyday peasant faith, a silent undercurrent of doubt beneath the public performance of piety? And men at the next table, perhaps sensing they have gone too far, or perhaps noticing a shifting gaze from the alewife, abruptly fall silent. They drain their cups, avoid each other's eyes, and quickly get up to leave, melting separately into the crowd outside. The moment of intense spiritual peril is over. You are left alone, your own ale now tasting sour and unpleasant. The simple refuge you sought has been violated. You came here to escape the dangers of the world, and instead, you found the most terrifying one of all. You have been reminded that the world is full of invisible poisons for the soul as well as the body, and that a careless word can be far deadlier than a contaminated well or a rusty blade. The warmth has gone out of the room. You finish your drink quickly, no longer feeling any pleasure in it, and decide it is time to go. This place of dangerous ideas is no longer a comfort. You leave the alehouse, the dangerous, heretical whispers still echoing in your ears. The fear of a misspoken word has soured the taste of the ale and left you feeling deeply uneasy. You have been reminded that the world contains dangers not just for the body, but for the soul. As you make your way back through the darkening market square, this feeling is driven home by a new and sudden commotion. A woman's shrill voice cuts through the evening din. "Thief! Stop him! He stole a loaf of bread." She is pointing a finger at a thin, ragged-looking man who is trying to hurry away through the crowd. Instantly, the atmosphere of the square changes. A man near you takes up the shout, "Stop, thief!" And another joins in. This is the hue and cry. It is more than just a public outcry. It is a legal obligation. When a crime is witnessed and the cry is raised, every able-bodied man within earshot is required by law to stop what they are doing and join the pursuit. To ignore the call, to stand aside and let the suspect escape, is a crime in itself. Reluctantly, not wanting to draw attention to yourself, you add your own voice to the growing clamor, a reluctant participant in a sudden wave of mob justice. The accused man doesn't get far. He is quickly cornered and seized by two burly merchants, who drag him back to the center of the square. He protests his innocence, his voice thin and reedy against the angry shouts of his accuser, the baker's wife. He claims he paid for the loaf. She claims he snatched it while she was distracted. There is no proof. There are no witnesses, other than the baker's wife herself. But in this court of public opinion, held in the middle of a muddy square, the verdict is immediate and decisive. The crowd, siding with the established shopkeeper against the ragged newcomer, murmurs its agreement. He is guilty. The town constable, a stout man with a cudgel at his belt, is summoned by the noise. He does not conduct an investigation. He does not ask for evidence. He listens to the baker's accusation, gauges the mood of the crowd, and delivers his judgment on the spot. The sentence is not a fine. The man clearly has no money, but a day and a night of public humiliation. He is sentenced to the stocks. You watch as the constable unlocks the heavy wooden device that stands permanently in a corner of the square. It is a crude instrument of justice, a heavy timber frame with holes for the man's ankles and wrists. He is forced to sit on the wet ground, and the heavy wooden beams are locked into place, trapping him. He is now a public spectacle, a helpless target for the town's scorn. The punishment is as much social as it is physical. Children, delighted by the drama, begin to gather small handfuls of mud and dung to throw at the trapped man. Passers-by stop to taunt him, to spit at him, to remind him of his shame. His crime, if he even committed it, was small, the theft of a single loaf of bread. His punishment is the complete and utter stripping of his dignity, a social branding that will follow him long after the stocks are unlocked. As you watch the grim spectacle, you think about what might have happened if the crime had been more serious, a murder, or an accusation of witchcraft, and the man's guilt less certain. You have heard stories from your grandfather of the old ways, of the judgment of God, the trial by ordeal. In those days, a suspect might be forced to carry a bar of red-hot iron for 10 paces. If his hand healed cleanly in 3 days, he was innocent. If it festered, he was guilty. Or he might be bound and thrown into the river. If he sank, the pure water was said to be accepting him, and he was declared innocent. If he floated, the water was rejecting his sin, and he was pronounced guilty. Legal historians and sociologists argue about the true nature of the ordeal. Was it a sincere, if terrifying, appeal to God to reveal the truth through a divine miracle? Or was it a rigged and cruel system, a form of psychological torture designed to extract a confession, or simply a way for a community to legitimize a verdict of guilt they had already reached in their own minds? Looking at the man in the stocks, You realize that not much has changed. Justice is still a public, brutal, and swift affair. You saw no evidence, heard no defense. You see only an accusation and a punishment. A cold knot of fear forms in your stomach. What if the man is innocent? What if the baker's wife has a grudge against him or simply made a mistake? You realize how fragile your own safety is. In this world, a single shouted accusation from a neighbor is all it takes to ruin you. The spectacle becomes too much to bear. You turn away from the miserable man in the stocks and the jeering crowd. The town which you came to for distraction now seems like a terrifying web of social and legal traps. The dangers here are not just from tainted food or infected wounds, but from the very people around you. You have seen how quickly a community can turn on one of its own, and the sight has left you feeling more isolated than ever. You turn away from the stocks, a sour taste in your mouth from the sight of such swift and public shame. The town, which had seemed a place of vibrant, if chaotic life, now feels like a series of traps for the unwary. The dangers here are not just from accident and disease, but from the words of your neighbors and the swift, unyielding judgment of the law. Seeking the gate and the familiar path home, you take a route that leads you along the inside of the great stone walls, past an open, grassy field that lies in the shadow of the Lord's castle. Here you encounter another kind of danger, one of a different order entirely. Two men on horseback, encased in gleaming steel, are at opposite ends of the field. They are knights, and they are preparing to practice their deadly craft. Their squires, young boys full of nervous energy, scurry around them, tightening the leather straps of their armor, polishing their helmets, and handing up their heavy shields. This is not a grand tournament with cheering crowds and ladies' favors. This is routine military training, the constant, dangerous work required to maintain the skills of the warrior class. You stop and watch from a safe distance, captivated by the spectacle. You notice that the tips of their long, thick wooden lances are not sharp, deadly points. Instead, they are fitted with small, three-pronged metal heads called coronals, designed to catch on a shield and distribute the force of the impact rather than to pierce flesh and armor. These are lances of courtesy, made for the sport. But you know that sport, for these men, is just a hair's breadth from real combat. Even with blunted weapons, the joust is an incredibly violent and perilous exercise. A falling knight can break his neck. A shattered lance can send a spray of dagger-sharp splinters through the eye slit of a helmet. A man can be killed by the sheer, brutal, blunt force trauma of the collision. The knights lower the visors of their great helms, enclosing their heads in steel. They settle into their high-backed saddles, take their shields, and couch their lances under their arms, the heavy weapons becoming extensions of their bodies. For a long moment, there is a tense silence. Then, with a shout and a dig of their spurs, they urge their massive war horses into a gallop. The ground seems to tremble under the thunder of the hooves. The two armored figures hurtle towards each other, a terrifying convergence of momentum, wood, and steel. The sun glints off their polished armor as they close the distance with shocking speed. Then comes the moment of impact. It is an explosion of sound, a violent, deafening crack that echoes across the field as both lances, just as intended, shatter on the opposing shields. You see a shower of splintered wood fly into the air. The first knight absorbs the blow, swaying dangerously in his saddle, but managing to control his horse and stay seated. The second knight is less fortunate. The impact lifts him clean out of the saddle, and he crashes to the earth with a sickening, heavy thud of metal on packed dirt. He lies motionless for a moment, a heap of twisted steel, and a collective gasp comes from the few onlookers. His squire rushes to his side, fumbling with the straps to unlace his helmet. The knight, dazed and shaking his head, is helped to sit up. He appears to be uninjured, saved by the thousands of hours of craftsmanship and immense expense that went into creating his suit of armor. For him and his companion, This is just another day at the office. They will share a laugh about it later over wine in the great hall. But for you, watching from the sidelines, the event is a stark reminder of the casual nature of the violence that underpins your entire world. You have heard the priests and the poets speak of the code of chivalry, of how knights are sworn to protect the weak, to uphold justice, and to show mercy. But looking at these two men, who have just engaged in an act of breathtaking force for simple practice, you see a different truth. Historians of chivalry debate the true nature of this famous code. Was it a genuine set of ideals that truly restrained the violence of a warrior aristocracy and encouraged them to be pious and merciful? Or was it more of a literary fantasy, a thin, romantic veneer of good manners and courtly love that did little to curb the brutal reality of a social class, whose primary function was, and always had been, the expert and violent application of force? You think of the brawl you witnessed outside the alehouse, a messy, desperate scuffle with knives. This is something else entirely. This is trained, ritualized, powerful violence, practiced with the casualness of a farmer honing a scythe. You realize that your safety, your property, your very life exists entirely at the whim of these men and their lord. You are the soft earth beneath their thundering hooves, a potential piece of collateral damage in their games and in their wars. Their casual power is a constant ambient threat, a danger so large and so fundamental to the structure of your world that you often forget it is even there. The unhorsed knight gets to his feet, dusts himself off, and prepares to continue the training, this time with blunted swords. The sight of it all, the power and the peril, is exhausting. You have seen the dangers that come from the bottom of society, the mob and the accuser, and now you have been reminded of the dangers that come from the very top. The town has taught you its lessons. With the sun now low in the sky, you turn your back on the field of mock combat and finally head for the gate, eager for the simple, familiar dangers of your own home. You leave the town behind you, passing through the great stone gate just as the sun kisses the horizon. The long walk home begins in the beautiful, fleeting moments of twilight. The sky is a canvas of deep orange and soft violet, and the world around you loses its sharp edges, dissolving into a landscape of dark, gentle silhouettes. The day, with its overwhelming catalogue of dangers, from the street brawls to the nightly violence, is finally over. Now you face the perils of the night. By the time you reach the familiar cluster of huts that is your village, the last of the light has bled from the sky. A profound darkness, a blackness almost unimaginable to your modern descendants, has fallen over the world. There is no friendly glow from streetlights, only the vast, indifferent light of the stars and a sliver of moon. You navigate the path to your own hut by memory, the darkness so complete that it feels like a physical substance, a thick, cool blanket wrapped around the world. You push aside the heavy hide flap of your doorway and step inside. The interior is a pit of absolute black, save for the faint, pulsing red glow of the embers in the central hearth, which your spouse has carefully preserved throughout the day. Your first and most crucial task is to bring light into this darkness, an act that is itself fraught with danger. You kneel at the hearth and gently blow on the embers, adding a few pieces of dried kindling until a small, welcome flame flickers to life. The fire illuminates the small hut, but its light is a wild, dancing thing, casting huge, distorted shadows that leap and writhe across the wattle and daub walls. The firelight is comforting, but it is not a useful light for any kind of work. For that, you have two options, both of them dim, smoky, and dangerous. Tonight, you have a small luxury, a single tallow candle purchased for a fraction of a coin at the market. You light its wick from a burning stick. It is not made of clean, sweet beeswax like the candles in the church. It is made of rendered animal fat, likely mutton tallow, and as it burns, it gives off a foul, greasy smell, the scent of singed meat and burning fat. The light it produces is a weak, yellowish, guttering glow, prone to sputtering and releasing small puffs of thick, black smoke. Your more common source of light is the humble rushlight. You have a bundle of them, prepared by your family in a quiet hour. The process is a testament to your resourcefulness. You must first gather the long, straight rushes from the riverbank. Then, with great care, you peel away the green outer layer, leaving just a single, thin, continuous strip of skin to act as a spine for the fragile, pithy core. This long, delicate wand is then thoroughly dried. Finally, it is dipped repeatedly into a bowl of melted animal fat and grease, saved from cooking, like bacon or mutton drippings. The result is a long, thin, greasy taper, a simple and ingenious device for creating a fleeting moment of light. You light one of these rushlights now. It catches with a sizzle, and the fat-soaked pith begins to burn. It gives off a feeble light, brighter than the tallow candle, but still incredibly dim, just enough to see the faces of your family as they huddle around the fire. It also drips hot, molten grease as it burns, a constant hazard you have to be wary of. And its lifespan is brutally short. A single foot-long rushlight might only burn for 15 or 20 minutes before it gutters out, plunging you back into darkness. Your evening will be measured out in a series of these small, sputtering, 20-minute victories against the night. You sit in this meager, flickering light, and you know the day's labor is truly over. Social historians who study the patterns of daily life argue that the sun was the absolute master of the medieval workday. The lack of cheap, effective, and safe artificial lighting meant that for the vast majority of people, when the sun went down, all detailed work had to cease. You cannot mend a shoe, sharpen a tool, or weave a piece of cloth by this pathetic, dancing light. The evening is not a time for productivity or hobbies. It is a short, dim, and often boring interlude between the end of work and the necessity of sleep. And every moment of this dim interlude is shadowed by the constant danger of fire. The open hearth, the greasy tallow candle, the sputtering, dripping rushlight, each is an open flame inside your home of wood, straw, and thatch. A moment of carelessness, a sleepy child knocking over a candle, gust of wind from the poorly sealed door, that is all it would take to turn your sanctuary into a raging inferno. The small flame that holds back the darkness is the very same flame that could consume everything you own. Your first rushlight begins to sputter, its flame shrinking to a tiny blue point before extinguishing with a final smoky hiss. The darkness rushes back in, thick and total, for a few heartbeats before you lean into the hearth and light another. The evening progresses this way, a slow cycle of flickering light and sudden darkness, a tiny, fragile island of visibility in a vast, silent ocean of night. And you know that the darkness outside your door holds its own terrors, both real and imagined, that are waiting for the last of the lights to go out. The last rushlight sputters and dies, its final wisp of greasy smoke curling into the darkness. Your spouse has banked the hearth, covering the precious embers with a layer of ash to preserve them, with luck, until morning. The small, warm circle of light that held the world at bay is gone, and your hut is plunged into a darkness so complete it feels like a physical weight. The sounds of your family settling onto their straw pallets are small, intimate rustles in the profound quiet. Before you lie down, you perform the final ritual of the day. You slide the heavy wooden bar across the inside of your door. It is a flimsy barrier. A determined thief could likely break it down. But you are not just barring the door against the dangers of the mortal world. You are sealing your home against the things that walk in the night. For in your world, the darkness is not empty. It is a different kingdom, with its own inhabitants, and they are now free to roam. You lie down on your lumpy mattress and pull the heavy, scratchy wool blanket up to your chin. You close your eyes, but your other senses are on high alert. You listen. The silence outside is not empty. It is full of tiny, unidentifiable sounds, each one magnified by the darkness and your imagination. The boundary between the world of the living and the world of spirits is at its thinnest during the night, and you know that a host of supernatural beings are now gliding through the sleeping village. There are demons sent from hell to tempt a pious soul into sin or to whisper blasphemous thoughts into the ear of a sleeper. There are the restless ghosts of the dead, those who were unconfessed, or murdered, or who buried treasure and cannot rest until it is found. You think of the graveyard, not far from the village, and shudder. Then there are the smaller, more mischievous spirits, the goblins, pixies, and sprites who might sour the milk in your goat, tie knots in the manes of horses, or delight in leading a traveler who is foolish enough to be out after dark astray in the woods. Every sound from the outside world is filtered through this belief system. A sudden gust of wind rattling the wooden shutter on the wall is not just the wind. It is a passing spirit, its cold fingers testing the strength of your home. The mournful hoot of an owl from the dark woods is not just a bird. It is an omen, a harbinger of sickness or misfortune. The faint, scratching sound on the thatched roof above you is probably just a branch, but it could be something else, something trying to find a way in. Fear is the constant companion of the night. On a truly wild, stormy night, when the wind howls like a pack of wolves, you hear the stories of the wild hunt. It is the most terrifying of all the night's dangers. You have been told that on certain nights, a spectral hunting party tears across the sky, a ghostly procession of skeletal hunters on skeletal horses, their packs of phantom hounds baying at their heels. They are led by a great, horned figure. Some say it is a demon. Others say it is the ghost of a damned nobleman, cursed to hunt for all eternity. To see the wild hunt is a terrible omen, foretelling war, famine, or plague. And to be caught in its path, to be out in the open when it passes, means your own soul will be swept up with it, forced to join the horrifying, endless chase through the night sky. On a windy night, every howl of the wind sounds like a distant hunting horn. You pull the blanket tighter. The stories your grandmother told you as a child, feeling intensely real in the oppressive darkness of the hut. Folklorists and theologians debate the true origin of these powerful beliefs. Are the tales of the wild hunt and the forest goblins simply the surviving echoes of older, pre-Christian pagan gods and nature spirits, now demoted to the status of demons by the new faith? Are they merely personifications of natural anxieties, the fear of the dark, the sound of a storm, the real danger of getting lost in the woods? Or were these beliefs actively, if subtly encouraged by the Church, as a way to demonstrate the tangible reality of the spiritual realm, a way to keep its flock fearful of the darkness and reliant on the Church's light for protection? You do not have the luxury of such academic questions. The terror is real. Your only shield is your faith. You have a small cross, crudely carved from a piece of wood, hanging over the doorway. Before you allow yourself to sleep, you murmur a quiet prayer, the words of the Pater Noster, a familiar, comforting rhythm in the dark. You ask your patron saint to watch over your home, to guard your family, and to keep the things that lurk in the darkness at bay. Even sleep itself is not a perfect refuge. For you, dreams are a gateway, a place where your soul can be visited. You pray tonight for a peaceful, empty, and dreamless sleep, a simple respite, not a channel for any more messages or omens. You have had enough danger for one day. You lie still, listening to the wind, your mind cataloging the invisible perils that stalk the world just outside your flimsy wooden walls. You have survived your home, your food, your work, and your society. Now you must simply survive the night. You lie in the deep, silent darkness, listening to the sound of your own heart beating. Your body is a single, profound ache, a testament to the day's labor. Your mind, however, is still working. It is taking a final inventory of the day, not of tasks completed or coins earned, but of danger survived. It is a long and sobering list. You ate your morning bread, and the holy fire of St. Anthony has not yet consumed your limbs. That is one victory. You drank the sour ale, and not the river water, and your stomach remains calm, free from the bloody flux. That is another. The cut on your hand, which could so easily have become a gateway for a fatal poison, has begun to heal. You look at the dark shape of the Lord's forest through a crack in the wall, and you feel the phantom thrill of the stag's appearance, a temptation you successfully resisted, and in doing so saved your hands and your freedom. You walked the chaotic streets of the town and were not trampled by a horse, drenched in filth from a window, or drawn into a sudden, deadly brawl. You were wise enough to see the mountebank for the charlatan he was, and cautious enough to refuse the apothecary's strange and unsettling cures. You witnessed the barber-surgeon's brutal work, but did not have to suffer it yourself. In the alehouse, you held your tongue while others spoke words of heresy, protecting yourself from a danger far worse than any blade. You stayed clear of the knights and their violent aims. And as you lie here now, the familiar scent of your own hearth is one of banked embers, not of a raging, all-consuming fire. To you, this is not just a list of lucky coincidences. In a world so saturated with peril, survival is not the default state. It is an act of grace. Your continued existence is a sign of God's providence, a temporary mercy that has been granted for one more day, but is by no means guaranteed for the next. Life is precarious, a tightrope walk over a pit of unseen hazards, and you have made it to the other side of this day. The monks in the distant priory will be chanting their last service now, the final canonical hour of Compline. You do not know the Latin words, but you know the prayer's intent, for it is the same one that is forming in your own heart. It is a plea for a peaceful night, a prayer for protection from the terrors of the darkness, both seen and unseen. It is a petition to be kept safe from the snares of the enemy, and to be allowed the grace of waking to the light of a new morning. You offer your own silent version of this prayer, a simple, desperate appeal to whatever power governs the rising of the sun. Your prayer is not for wealth, or for a better harvest next season. It is simply for tomorrow. Historians of daily life and mentality attempt to reconstruct the medieval peasant's sense of the future. Was life lived so completely and precariously in the present that long-term planning was a psychological luxury one could not afford? Or was there a constant, grinding anxiety about what the future might hold? Sickness, famine, the death of the child that shaped every waking moment and every fearful prayer? Lying here, your thoughts are not on next year. They are only on the coming dawn. You finish your silent prayer. You have done all that you can do. You have worked, you have eaten. You have navigated the dangers of the world as best you can, and you have commended your soul to God. There is nothing left to do but to surrender to the final necessary vulnerability of sleep. The long catalogue of the day's fears begins to soften and blur. The clang of the anvil, the stench of the tannery, the shouts of the crowd, the chilling whisper of heresy, they all recede, their sharp edges worn smooth by your profound exhaustion. Your body aches, your mind is weary, and sleep, once a place of potential danger, now seems like a welcome and merciful oblivion. You let go of the day's anxieties and drift into the one state that offers a true, if temporary, escape from the perilous business of living. And now, as you let go, that world of danger and darkness begins to dissolve completely. The feeling of the lumpy straw, the chill in the air, the memory of fear, they all soften, becoming distant and unimportant. Like a story you once heard long ago, that small, dark hut is no longer your reality. You are safe now, in your own time, in your own quiet and comfortable space. Feel the gentle, steady support of your own bed beneath you, a comfort and a safety unimaginable to the person you just were. There is no coarse wool, only soft fabric against your skin. There is no smoky air, Only the clean, still atmosphere of your own peaceful room. The catalog of dangers is closed. The night holds no terror here, only the promise of deep and restorative rest. Let your mind become as quiet and as still as the sleeping medieval village after the curfew bell has rung. There is nothing more to fear, nothing more to survive. The long day is over. It is time to sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.